guess it's morning for me, might not be for you, but welcome to Manifesting with Marae. On today's episode, I am going to be sharing with you some tips on how to help you become location independent. So, a lot of people want to become location independent in today's world, which I think is great. I think everybody should do it. Go discover the world, 1 month or 3 months at a time. But there are some tips that I like to share with you because I think they would have been really helpful for me when I started on this journey. So, here we go. Tip number one, if you would like to become location independent, the first thing that I suggest you do is do some research. It may sound really, really obvious, but some things sound amazing and look amazing because everybody's just sharing the best moments of, in this case, location independent life. But I will tell you that there's a lot that goes into it. So I suggest you do some research because it may or may not be for you. Once you do some research, you'll find out what kind of world you like to get into, what kind of jobs you like to do, how long you like to stay. Maybe you want to just continue living in your home country and just travel more often rather than moving around all over the world. Anyway, there are lots of ways to do it. There are lots of options. You're not stuck with just one. So I suggest you do some research so you can prepare for that. Tip number two is learn a skill. If you already know you want to become location independent, that means you have to work online, most likely, unless you want to get a job in your destination, which could be done, but it's not the best idea. So if you have to work online, maybe you need to learn a new skill unless you already know it. If you already know it, that's fantastic. But if you don't, look into learning some new skills in the online world. They could be anything from learning some social media skills, some marketing skills, blogging, teaching something you already know. I talked about that in my other episodes, and I'm gonna go ahead and link this one here as well, so you can go ahead and watch it. But if you already know that you want to be location independent, you need to learn some skills. Because if you have some skills, you can take them with you all over the world and use them online. Perfect. If you already learned some skills, the next step is to get a job online. When I say get a job online, it could be start your own job online. So if you're an artist or if you're a person who likes to share, whether it's your information or entertainment or anything that you know, any skills that you want to share, you can start that already. You can go ahead and join some Facebook groups and do all that stuff, but you can also get a job online. I shared places where you can go ahead and start getting jobs online already on my other episode, and I'll go ahead and let you know how to find them here as well. But some ideas are to start looking into places like Fiverr.com, Freelancer, Upwork, Facebook groups. You can look location independent, digital nomads, jobs, all that stuff on Facebook, and you'll see a bunch of groups. Start joining those and start connecting with people and seeing what kind of jobs you can start. If you start the jobs before you start traveling, it'll give you not only a little bit of security and stability, but it'll help you get a handle on things. Because once you start traveling, you get this whole thing of like, I just want to go traveling every day, and you forget that you're traveling and working. So it could be a little bit tricky to establish that. So I suggest that you start before you commence your trip. And that way it'll be a little bit easier to transition. If you already have the job online, the next step would be to minimalize. Oh my gosh, minimalize. I could talk about this forever. It's taken me years to master minimalization, but it has changed my life. When I first took my first trip abroad, I remember I went with, I might as well have flown with a U-Haul truck full of stuff. And I thought I was taking just what I needed. Of course, then I realized that I didn't need 75% of what I have brought. Every trip I've taken has been a repetition of this, except for every time with less and less. You need nothing. If you're becoming a digital nomad or just traveling long term, you need a few changes of clothing, essential toiletries, and your computer so you can work from it. That's it. Really, that is all you need. It's really hard when you're traveling or spending extended times abroad and living on a very small budget. It's really hard to be paying like $500 at home from storage, or calling people and begging people to hold your stuff for longer, or having to worry about coming back because you have to get rid of things. I had a friend who had to come back home all the way from Southeast Asia just to sell a scooter she had left somewhere that nobody wanted anymore. And why put yourself through that? Get rid of stuff. If you know you're going to travel full time, you can always rebuy something. A thing I do that helps me a lot is I start selling all my stuff months before I go on a trip. So some things that you'll need, obviously, so keep them till the end. Some things you could even sell with a date. So I'll get rid of this, whatever, July 20th when I leave. Or some things you could just start selling already. Like some things you know you're not gonna need. You know what I mean? So start working on that, selling all that stuff. Prepare your mindset and your life for not being there, and use all the money you make from selling all your stuff to budget your travel. And just to give you an idea, $100 could buy you a week of stays in South America or Africa or Southeast Asia, or even sometimes in Europe, in Eastern Europe, and some other countries, in a hostel or whatnot. So sell your stuff. Even if you think you can get a lot from it, sell it, because it's better than nothing, and that's money you can use in your travels. All right? All right, if you've already minimalized your life and you're getting ready to go on the road, the next thing is to prepare for cultural shock. Nobody talks about this, but I've experienced cultural shock so many times in my life, even after traveling for a long time. So it's not a big deal, but every place is different, every country is different, every group of people is different, every human is different, right? So get ready for that. Even if you have visited this place, it's very different when you move to a place. Cultural shock could be anything from not being able to find the foods you're used to eating, to not being able to drive around instead of have to take public transportation, to have to turn on the heater every time you shower, because in some countries they don't have automatic heaters, anything like that. Just do some research in the country you're going to, plan for that, and be prepared to be shocked. It could be positive shock or negative shock. Just be prepared. If you're expecting it, it's not gonna scare you off. Just know that it happens, and that sometimes within 3 months and 6 months of traveling, you will become homesick. You will have this feeling of, oh my gosh, I miss the foods I eat every day. I miss my family. I miss my friends. That's gonna happen. Prepare for that. But if you really wanna have life on the road and have a global lifestyle where you visit and live all over the world, you gotta do it. So if you prepare, it's gonna be easier for you. The next thing I would recommend that you do, is to live where your money lasts. A lot of people would love to live in Paris. You love to live in Madrid. You love to live in in Tokyo. Yeah, that'd be great. But if you're just starting as a digital nomad, or location dependent, or just traveling long time, I suggest you start with inexpensive places. Because if you're making money online and you live anywhere in Europe or the United States or Australia or any country that has any kind of advantage in making money, your money will go further. So if you've saved dollars, if you've saved euros or pounds, or any kind of currency that holds value in another country that may not as much, move to a cheaper country. Start traveling from the places that you can afford to stay for a long time and travel abroad, right? So you can make a home base. Let's say we made a home base in Kuala Lumpur because it was a cheap country, or cheaper than the United States. It allowed us to travel cheaply and easily all over Southeast Asia. It had a crazy fast internet, which is a super important thing to look for when you're traveling and working online. And it was just a convenient, comfortable place to live in. So we made it a home base for like a month and traveled from there to Southeast Asia, right? With the same thing with South Africa. We wanted to travel in the southern African continent, so we made South Africa the home base because the currency there, even though it's not as cheap as other countries, the internet is good. Our currency went a long way, so we were able to stay there and not spend as much money as we would have spent if we were living somewhere in the United States or in Europe, right? So always think about that. Choose a country where your money is going to go a long way. And if your goal, obviously if you're here, it's because you want to travel. So you're not going to be stationary in that country. But if you move somewhere like, let's say, in the case of Southeast Asia, Bali or Kuala Lumpur, these are great cities, or in this case of Bali Island, where you can travel from really easy because it's really well connected. It's relatively inexpensive and your money goes a long way. So you're going to be able to stay there with $10,000 much longer than you will stay, let's say, in Miami. And then if you're working online and you're only making $500, $1,000 a month, which is an amount of money that you can totally live with if you're living abroad in other countries, then your life becomes easier, because if you're making $500 and you're living in Mexico, you might be able to survive. But if you're making $500 and you're living in New York, there is no way, right? So just think about that. Think of going to a place where your money goes a long way so you can stay there longer. And the last tip I'm going to give you is to know your why, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and go into this a little bit more and explain exactly what I mean by that. Knowing your why is really important because, like I mentioned before with the be prepared for cultural shock tip, you will get homesick. You will have days where it will get hard. It's not gonna skyrocket from one day to the other. When I first started posting pictures with the aim of becoming an influencer, I remember I was like, within 2 months this is gonna work. Oh my god, it's gonna work. It has to work. it didn't work. So know your why. My thing was I would like to continue traveling. I want to see the entire world. And I know for a fact that if I wait until I retire, one, I may not be able to enjoy it the way I like to enjoy it. And two, I'm not going to be able to see the entire world if I start when I'm 70 or 65 or 60, right? So I got to start now. I knew my why. I knew that no matter how uncomfortable it was, how hot, how I had to walk 7 miles in Mozambique because the bus left me on the middle of a street, no matter how tired I was, how hot, none of these things matter because I know my why. I know my goal is to travel the entire world. And to me, that's more important than all the comfort in the world, right? So when you know your why, when obstacles come, and they will come because that's just part of life, you will have a reason that's so strong to move forward that it won't shake you. When you lose your first online job, when you don't have enough clients, when you're only getting one comment on your pictures, when you're stuck in a destination, when you lose your passport, when you get robbed, when you get stiffed, when you get treated poorly, when you're missing your mom when you're abroad, any of those cases, if you know your why, you'll be better off because your why will be the reasoning argument that's gonna battle the other side of you that's feeling crappy that day. So whatever you're feeling, if you know your why, you can always go back and be like, that's why I'm doing it. So in my case, when I have cramps, when I'm tired, when it's too hot in the destination I go to, when I don't have enough money, when I don't have enough clients, when I'm, not convinced that I'm going to be able to travel for another 6 months, when I think I'm going to have to go back and get a real job, any of these circumstances, and they happen often, and they can, and they will, but for some of us, they never happen. Some people get really lucky. For some of us, they happen often. It takes years to be able to accomplish something. If you know your why, you always have a reason. You always have an arguing voice as to why you're fighting for this dream. So have your why, write it down, write it across your head and look in the mirror, take a picture of it, whatever you need, know your why. And if you follow all these tips and any other you may have, you can totally do it. Anybody can do it. I promise you, it can totally be done. So if your dream is to become location independent, know that there's a little bit of work to do, but it's not impossible, it's not hard. And if you have any other tips that you'd like to share, please let me know in the comment section so that I can go ahead and share it with the rest of the world as well. And don't forget, if you like what I'm talking about, subscribe. Thank you.